Okay, at this time, we'll, 6 o'clock, we'll call the joint meeting of the Public Works, Facilities, Finance and Administration Committees to order. Roll call for finance first. Mary? Here?
Here. Here.
Gamma,
Here.
Ashley,
Here.
Pearson,
Here.
Kirby.
Here.
For Public Works Supervisor Grady,
Aye.
Belsky,
Here.
Franco,
Here.
Becker,
Here.
Gamma,
Here.
Gray,
Here.
and Meadows.
Meadows should be marked excused.
Thank you, Mary. At this time, we'll open the meeting up to citizens' comments. Any citizens wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak? Seeing none, citizens' comments are closed.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I didn't see your hand. I apologize.
No, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if this was the proper meeting to speak at. I am here tonight.
You could come.
Address-
Is there a chair up there? Could you get her a chair? Thank you.
Sorry. My name is Nancy Washburn, 7450 County Line Road in Mount Pleasant. And, I'm here tonight to speak regarding the Pike River Watershed Project. I come to you uniquely qualified to speak about that. I am a village trustee in the village of Mount Pleasant. Sorry, I ran up the stairs. Not used to doing that. I am a village trustee in Mount Pleasant, so as you know, we have a vast area in Mount Pleasant that we've spent many millions of dollars and many decades putting into planning and implementation. I also am a resident that lives next to and along the Pike River corridor. 20 acres of my husband's family farm was taken as part of that project. So we are the last section there of Area 9, right on Highway KR. Because of that unique situation, I can speak to you as a resident of the community who has found the Pike River project to be an amazing restoration. When it was first implemented and started, the Pike River in all essence was dead. There were no fish in it. It was not, it had a lot of coyotes along it, but it didn't have a lot of wildlife, and the prairies were in bad shape, and the water, the flood situation in the village itself was in bad shape. In many sections of the town, the Pike River, because it wasn't functioning properly, was flooding out vast areas. Now, several years later, we have restarted this amazing ecosystem. The sandhill cranes are back, the northern pike are back and running in the river, and the vast wetland microcosm that was the intent of the plantings and the restoration have all been restored and coming back and blooming. The pathway is heavily traveled. As you know, in Kenosha County, we have people that light in the summertime along KR, the stop and go light for the Pike River passengers. The people are stopping constantly because of the traffic. People with bicycles, people with their children, people walking dogs, families walking together. They are enjoying it and they're using it cross county. They're crossing across Highway KR because they're going down through Petrified Springs and following the pathway and riding for miles and miles and miles. It's a significant recreation area, and in Mount Pleasant as a community, it has had a significant impact on attracting tourism. And it's allowed us to plan and hold numerous events around the recreational aspects of the Pike River pathway. Another significant increase has been the property values. Property values along the Pike River that abut it, like my own home, has gone up significantly in value because of its desirability and location to the Pike River. But also the properties as you go north into Mount Pleasant and into the county along the restoration that have been saved from flooding and had their rears of their properties all enhanced by the impact of the improvements of it. So as a resident, as a village trustee, and as someone who has a piece of their earth involved in the Pike River project, it seems to me that it's really time for Kenosha County to step up to the plate and take responsibility for finishing the project. We now are sending beautiful clean water down to Kenosha County. And what are we ending up with? But it gets clogged. And at the end result, what is being let into Lake Michigan and our water, from our watershed? So I feel it's very important, and I hope that you will take that consideration very much to heart, and look forward to hearing your good favor in terms of moving this project forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizens wishing to speak? I'll go one more time. Okay, seeing none, citizens' comments are closed. Public Works Facilities, a resolution to approve a plat plan and authorize the acquisition of the properties associated with the plat plan. Andy?
Hey, thank you. Yes, so before you have a resolution, which is in regards to the plat. So this resolution came before Finance Committee and Public Works, and actually PDEC several years ago. It was put on pause for various different reasons, and different things have been taking place since then, as you heard at the committee as a whole, that we were able to present. And so now, tonight we have before you, before Public Works and Finance, is just putting forth the plat, and I know there might be some additional discussions regarding that. We have Chris Walton here in regards for any questions again with the numbers, which really ends up being a finance part later. We have Dave Giordano from Root Type Wind here is also, and Shelley is quite involved with this project and moving it forward and working with Army Corps and all that it is. So we're here really to answer any other questions, or if there's anything that you're not quite understanding what is before you, but it is just putting forth the plat. I do know PDEC met on this last night and it was approved. There was an amendment, and that amendment, I believe, is before you as it was approved last night. Some language changed to the second last and last sentences that I think we're just clarifying some things, and we're actually clarifying some of the, I guess, concerns that were back in 2022. So being able to move this forward. And I'm not sure if Dave made Supervisor Gerson made the amendment and then it went through unanimously. If you know, you could certainly can add to the committee as to what the purpose of that was.
Sure. You want me to report on why I made the change?
Supervisor Gerson, you have the floor. Why don't you read the amendment too?
Well, it's in part, I should let Aaron read hers part, but my part was that last.
Well, how many amendments are there? 2 or 1?
There was one amendment that affected a couple parts, but
Okay.
this very last sentence, be it further resolved that the county board does hereby authorize the administration to negotiate terms and conditions necessary to purchase subject properties with final purchase subject to approval by the county board, which I don't know if you remember the last time we went through this, we had that same language that we amended that authorized the administration to negotiate and buy the property without bringing it back to the county board. So we just kind of did the same thing we did last time. Change, but then we ended up not approving the resolution too. But we did question, not bringing, that there was like an open-ended, you can negotiate with whatever the price is and without bringing it back to the county board. So the terms and conditions could be set, the pricing could be set, but then the board gets one last crack at it. So that's the basic change that we made.
So you're removing the fact that it has to come back to the county board? Is that what you're?
No, we're adding that it has to come back.
Oh, okay. All right.
So what you have before you is the amended.
Okay, that's what okay, that's
That might be a
good.
little
That's good.
confusing because you're
That's
not
good.
Seeing the language that was
That's
changed.
good. That's good. Because otherwise I was gonna start off with heartburn.
The one that went out, the reason I explained it that way was the one that went out in our packet, in all of our packets. Authorize the administration to negotiate terms, condition, and pricing without bringing it back to county board for final approval. So this one is different than the one from the packet.
Supervisor Decker, did you have anything to add to that, or are you
No,
comfortable with
It was all,
everything said?
it was
Okay.
all one thing.
Okay, all right. Any comments on what was just brought up? Supervisor Nuno?
Well, I'm all for it. I think it's really a good reason, but I want to add on this, that was quite a few years ago. who's gonna be doing the negotiations to purchase the properties?
Who will be doing the negotiation?
Yes,
Well, we would hire, Core, CORRE. They're the same firm that does negotiations with highway projects. And they would be the ones that would be going out and soliciting that.
okay, and then they will bring it to like a committee or just it will come directly to the,
My understanding is that if, once there's a negotiated agreement, is that that would then come, I would suspect, the finance, and then it would go to the county.
and they will agree, in other words, if there is an agreement,
Correct.
whoever you're hiring, and you said the name, but I'm bad with names. Anyway. So they will make the preliminary agreement with them, and then it comes to finance.
Correct.
Okay, a few years ago, we had big discussions about this here with the properties that we're buying. And then county executive, the previous from the executive, they said that from that point on, they will include somebody from the county board of supervisors to be involved with the negotiations. I know we did not really have anything major from them. I know that we have this here, so basically we're not gonna do that, right?
I'm not aware that that's what we would be doing. We would be working with, or to negotiate the request, come to an agreement, bring it before finance and county board to approve that. And if that weren't to be the case, then we would have to go back to renegotiate.
I'm only gonna have conversation right now on what was just brought up as the amendment, because somebody's gonna need to move it as amended before we have a full-blown discussion. So if you want to jump in on what's been said about this,
I just
That's
want
fine.
to say that that's typically what's done with highway property, so it's not deviating from any standard. So,
That's my understanding.
yeah, so that's all.
Supervisor Gearston,
I'll move the amendment.
Second. Well, you mean?
we can just move
It's not- it's
move it
already
as
already-
amended.
Oh, move the resolution I'll move the
And second,
resolution.
and
I'll move
second.
the resolution as amended.
Okay, is there an attorney in the room? Does each committee have to do that, or can we joint move first and second?
I think past practice has been each committee has a person.
You want to cover your back on that one?
Okay, we'll have finance make a motion to accept as amended and seconded, moved by Supervisor Gearston, seconded by Supervisor Kirby.
I make a motion to approve as amended
Second,
for Public Works.
It's been moved by Supervisor Decker, seconded by Supervisor Belsky for the record, so the owl can hear, for Public Works. So now we have a motion as amended on the table, so anybody can talk about anything pertaining to the project. Don't all raise your hand. Supervisor Franco.
So can you just remind us what was the financial implications of the deal?
So the numbers that were,
Yeah, the numbers that were from when it was presented at the,
that
Just-
get into
Yeah.
that then. So the county share that we're proposing. The county share that we're proposing is at like a max of 5.125 million. That includes a portion of what we already accounted for, which is 2.6. And then what we're envisioning would be the worst case scenario of 2.5. So the initial resolution that will come to finance after this will be for not to exceed 2.5 million.
we basically got half of it covered.
Yeah, and the 2.5 is been working through quite when they have an initiative to try and get at least 1.6 million. So the hope is that the county does not even need to use
No, that's
the
right.
2.5, but rather closer to
A million, right? I remember that now. Okay, thank you.
I'd like to just kind of build a little bit on what Ms. Washburn was saying. I'm been in this business for 20 years. We have clients that do this type of work, and everything you covered, I thought was excellent. And for people who really want to pay attention to dollars and cents, and I appreciate that because that's incredibly important, that there are studies that that over the long term show that the payback of preserving those, the surrounding property values going up and the tax base that goes up with the property values is a great investment. And I'd be happy to share any of this with anybody, if you want to know more about that, but it covers a lot of bases, and that's not one that is talked about, I think, as often as it needs to be.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Okay, my turn. I can appreciate you bringing up the financial part of it, because that's really our committee and what we do. I'm gonna digress a little bit. I had to swallow what I thought was right with the courthouse. You know, when we looked at how much money that was gonna cost our taxpayers, and now we're asking the taxpayers for this. I am gonna support this, but my first thing is that's a lot of money to ask the taxpayers to put out, number one. But I do appreciate all the work that's been done by everybody to get us to this point, and the money that's been collected, and the grants that have been applied for and received. So, I mean, this is more or less a one-time shot to do this, and I can appreciate that. But it's a tough budget time, and my constituents are having a hard time right now. So, I mean, I don't take these votes lightly, especially when it comes to the finance, okay? The second reason I'm gonna support it is the fish. I believe Lake Michigan needs to be, you know, kept healthy, and I voted for certain things in this past budget to help the salmon and that type of thing. So I have to look at that too. So that's important to me. But I'm not gonna go without putting on record the fact that we are having to have the taxpayers pay this. And I'm hoping that we can get it down closer to the 900,000 rather than the 2.5 million. It's just a big number for me. So that's how I feel about it. So, like I said, I do appreciate the work that's been done and the money that's been received through grants and other donations and that type of thing. And the fact that we have this one opportunity to do it. So I will be supporting it, but I just want everybody to know it's tough. I mean, it's tough for me with the finances that we have looking forward. So, anything else from the committee? Supervisor Kirby.
So, and I'm just gonna kind of throw this out to the room. Is there anybody that could provide information on the financial impact in Racine County of the portion that's already been restored? Is there information on how far property values have gone up? Is there information on how much development has happened and how that's impacted, property tax dollars that they've been able to pull in because of it?
What are you looking at me?
I feel like that would be good information to know, you know, as we
Yeah,
go to vote for this.
it would be good, and I know the information is out there, and I guess I didn't come prepared to speak to that. But I know that our tax assessor could be helpful in that, and it hasn't been just the properties along the pike, but it's been the whole community as a whole, and all of our parks and recreation system has been lifted up in value as well as contribution and usage by the residents. So revenues come in a number of different ways, not just the tax value of the increase in the homes, but the revenue generated through parks and recreation, because the pathway threads through some of those other venues.
Thank you.
Yeah, normally I don't let citizens talk a second time, but go ahead.
Three things. One, I reached out to Sam Schultz, who's the Director of Development in Mount Pleasant, years ago, about keeping track of how those land values have gone up. He does not have specific information on that.
Okay.
But thank you, Nancy, for your information. That's helpful. The second thing is that in your, I sent a bunch of letters of recommendation, letters of support. The last letter was from American Rivers, who did an economic analysis of the project. And if you look on the last page of that packet of letters, there's 10 areas that FEMA looks at in terms of evaluation of the project. And you can see the value that's, that the project like this brings, not just the environmental value, but the land valuation as well. And then the final thing is that we already have 4 grant applications out for 1.625 million. I can't guarantee any of those grants will come in. What I can tell you is there's another letter in your packet from the Fund for Lake Michigan that they are seriously considering this grant, and soon. They have to go through their board of directors, and so I wasn't able to get that done for this meeting. But my sense is they want to continue to invest in the South Branch. The other grants, one is with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. I applied to that grant last year for $1 million. We just missed the cut. We made it to the second round. This year, I already reapplied for a lesser amount, hoping that will pass through. That grant doesn't get awarded till June or July. And then we have 2 private foundations that we're talking to, where we requested $500,000 each, and they are seriously considering those as well.
Thank you. I have another question too, is we've heard about the Mount Pleasant and what it's done for that area. For somebody who knows the scope and what's going to be done, is the work that went in there the same project that we're doing down here?
Question for you. I think Dave knows the best, that it was a 2-part. It was done in 2 different ways through multiple, I think 9 different segments.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is it's very similar.
Okay, because otherwise we're not comparing apples to apples. You can come and tell me how good Mount Pleasant is and how all these changes were done, but if that's not what's happening down here because we had to modify the plan or something, then that's different. So I just wanted to know somebody who, is familiar with the plans, whether or not we're looking to compare apples to apples.
I think yours is just a shorter section and,
Okay,
if you will, but same types of activities will be.
okay, thank you. Supervisor Gearston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My research shows that the grant types are different. That this is a restoration grant. They, part in Racine County, mitigated flooding. So they did a lot more work to mitigate flooding. This one, it's a restoration grant. It is designed differently and does not mitigate flooding. That's what my research showed.
And Supervisor Gearston, you had issues with it not mitigating flooding before.
Right.
What changed your mind?
So this project got paused. And I'm glad we did pause it. The county executive was the one that saw the challenges of the project. When I decided to run for the county board, I did a 10-page report of things I would want to deal with. I looked at the operations and I looked at the capital. The very top thing that was the most challenged was an operations item. I worked with the chairman of the county board and we dealt with that. On the capital side, the very top item that was challenged was the human services building. That was the most concerning for me. This project did hit the list. It wasn't the top item, but it hit the list. It hit the list because it had been reported, and I went back and looked at minutes and looked at reports made by county board supervisors, and it was represented to the county board supervisors. And therefore, the county board supervisors did report on the board floor that it would mitigate flooding. So that those reports were made to the county board, and we had written reports that said it would mitigate flooding. And after I researched it, I confirmed that it would not mitigate flooding. So that was one issue, but that was only one issue. Another issue was the financing. We looked at the county share, and the number that was supposed to reduce the county share was too soft. So the county share could go to 5 million, 6 million, 7 million. This project, after the county executive put it back on, on the drawing board, paused it, now is bringing it back, cuts that. If you look at the inflation adjusted county share, we're probably being conservative by saying the old plan would have been 7 million. It probably would have been more than 7 million. This plan has a potential of being half that, about 3.5 million. So that's another reason why this is more favorable, because that you're leveraging 20, 5 to 1, 1 to 5, 20% would be our share. It could even be better than that. But another big issue that I had was we got a resolution to buy land that didn't have any value. And the only value it had was to do the restoration. And if we, for some reason, couldn't go forward with the restoration, we would have land of no value that we spent $1 million or $2 million on, or possibly more. The one reason I say that is because the funding package was not complete. We had only approved the project had the potential to go as high as 6 or 7 million, and we had only approved a little over 2 million in bonds. And we all know it takes 18 votes to approve the bond. So we were potentially building a bridge to nowhere. There's a movie about that where they drive off a bridge to nowhere that was built. I won't mention the name of the movie, and that's what we were doing. So
The bridge to nowhere.
One thing I'll say is that this project, coupled with the approval for the land, is also the finance and budgetary piece and the bonding piece. So that's all going to come together. And if for some reason the bonding piece doesn't get approved, the county board has to take one more kick at the cat on approving the property. So by County Executive Kirkman, and it's my understanding she worked with members of the county board. I'm not going to name them because I don't know everybody who on the county board was involved, but she worked with members of the county board, and everyone working together made this project feasible.
Okay. Supervisor Decker.
When you're talking about apples to apples compared to Mount Pleasant, I believe our project is different in the way it's being built. Andy, is that correct? The way you presented it when Supervisor Robinson and I went on a tour with you, we're talking about how it's being built differently than Mount Pleasant.
Yeah, I think you're referring to, so yeah, Mount Pleasant, the beginning stages, and correct me if I'm wrong, was through four-month flood mitigation. So there were a lot of homes up there, 100 homes or so that they were really working on. The last stages were through Army Corps were 206 projects, which is a pure restoration project. So, but some of the design that they had, there was a more stair step design, where the design down here is going to be a little different on that, because there's a lot of acreage that they're able to utilize to bring into more of a wetland type nature again to help work from that capacity.
So it's not gonna look like Mount Pleasant.
Right.
Correct. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you for that. Supervisor Franco.
Yeah, just a quick geography question. You say it's west, the Pike River is west of 60. What's the furthest western border of the river itself? Is it east of 88 or is it near the train tracks in between? Because I noticed the land here seems to be between both of the train tracks. I'm just trying to visualize what's the furthest western border of the Pike River.
Right, so it might be a little deceiving with the maps because they're turned sideways. So if you orientate them north and south, I mean, it does flow from south to north.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically between the two railroad tracks.
Okay, that's what I thought. So it's east of 88th Street then, the western border.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Just a correction.
Supervisor Brookhouse.
Thank you. But there's a section over by the airport, is that?
Yeah, that's what
There is the airport tributary
Yeah,
that does go east to west. That is part of the project there.
so it does go west of the tracks.
It does onto the county detention property.
Just a correction.
Yeah, that's probably what I heard.
Thank you. All right, the last thing I'm gonna ask is, this is a restoration, not a flood mitigation, right? That's what you're telling me. So if it starts flooding, is that gonna ruin our restoration and cost us more money?
No. They know that.
I'll heard you say that. Just saying.
It's working, right?
Yeah, see? Yep. Okay,
Right, because I mean, it's a restoration project and it's known that the floods are gonna come, rains are gonna come, waters are gonna go up, the waters are gonna go down.
Okay. As long as I'm not paying money to restore something and then all of a sudden it floods out and it's not restored anymore. So, I mean, you see why I'm asking that, right? Okay, all right, thanks. All right, we can, at this point, Finance Committee, it's been moved and seconded. Any other comments from the Finance Committee members? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Wait, Youth and Governance? Now it passes unanimously. Bill, you've got it.
For members of the Public Works Committee, all those in favor of this proposition say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. That is all our joint meeting has on an agenda.
Motion to adjourn.
It's been moved by Supervisor Belsky, second by Supervisor Gray to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Our joint meeting is adjourned. So we'll wait 5 minutes and start the finance meeting.
Yeah, so it's.
Nobody leave till you sign the resolution, please.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Good team. Yeah, so it goes south to north, and that's about as far west as it goes. Yeah, where's the detention center?
The detention center is just north of 158. It's like right there.
So something comes in that.
Okay, something's gonna connect.
Near the airport, essentially.
Yeah, the airport.
Oh, yeah.
Sarah?
Hey, how are you?
Wow. Playing little musical chairs, I see, huh? Yeah.
I like to test them all out.
So, yeah.
Like that.
Hi, Dan. Diamond, we're diamonds. That's the best word.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are you Taurus or?
That is problems.
Yeah.
All right, folks, at 6:36, we'll call the finance meeting to order. We'll call. Here.
Here. Here.
Kama,
Here.
Geschke,
Here?
Pearson,
Here.
Kirby.
Here.
Big member Charlotte. Here. And big member Sasha.
Here.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open the meeting up to citizens' comments. Any citizens wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak? Any citizens wishing to speak? Seeing none, citizens' comments are closed. Reports of the chair, I have none. Reports of the committee. Does the committee have any reports? Seeing none, we'll move on. Approval of the minutes, February 11th, 2025.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved by Supervisor Gama, second by Supervisor Gearston. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Those minutes are approved. Number 6, Kaba Housing Initiative.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation, Mr. Chairman. Really appreciate it. I'm really excited that Andy Bueller is also here tonight. He's been a key partner of this housing efforts. At the last time that I had come to this committee meeting, you had mentioned that there was some interest in hearing a little bit more about our housing efforts. So I'm here today to talk specifically about that.
Say your name for the record.
I'm so sorry, Nicole Riff.
I know who you are, but I need to have you all hear it. Thank you.
So apologies for that. So I figured what I would do tonight is just set the table with a little bit of data that's driving the reason for this housing initiative. And then I'll talk in detail about what we're doing in partnership with the county. Feel free to interrupt me if you have questions. And then Andy's here as well, in case there's anything county specific you'd like to ask him. So as you know, housing has been in the news a lot, probably the last 5 or so years. So we're seeing a lot, especially in relation to the shortage all across the country. There are a lot of factors that are leading to that, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. But you'll see that a lot of our communities are trying to do something to solve that problem. So lots of good headlines recently of different developments that have been proposed. Uline has announced that they're dedicating $3 million to the city of Kenosha for an affordable housing effort that will be matched by the city. So we're excited about that. But we figure, it's probably time for us to start getting involved in this. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides I have, I think, are the most telling pieces of data when it comes to just how acute the shortage is here in Kenosha County and also really nationwide. This is a specific to Kenosha County. So Sewer PAC, the Regional Planning Commission, they do a lot when it comes to data. I'm sure you're all familiar with them because they do a lot for the county as well. But these charts are part of their Vision 2050 plan, where they look at projections for what they think is going to be happening across the region and then specific to each of our counties. And I think if you look at these charts kind of matched up with each other, you'll see what the acute problem is here. So in the top 2 charts, you see the projections for population growth and household growth, and they are both below the lowest projections. For the population, it has been pretty much stagnant and has not really been growing. Households have been ticking up, but that's largely because family sizes are shrinking. So you have a lot more 1 and 2 person households, whereas in the past you would have had larger households from that standpoint. When you match that up with our job growth, there is a total mismatch there, right? So within those projections, you see that we are blowing the highest projections out of the water. And so a lot of what we've talked about, and I've been here, in the past, we've got these big announcements, these big companies that are coming here. We have companies like Uline that are continuing to grow. So they keep creating jobs, but there are not people that are moving here necessarily for those jobs. So that's something that we're really keeping an eye on. We think that part of the reason for that is that there's not enough housing to accommodate people that in theory would want to live here and would want to work here. We can take a look at the next slide. That'd be great, please. So this, I think, is probably one of the most telling charts when you talk about the nationwide issue when it comes to a housing shortage. I did it specific to kind of southeastern Wisconsin, but if you think about the recession, we had been on track to be creating a lot of houses all across the country. There was a ton of housing development and construction happening. 2008, 2009 happened, and that plummeted. The bottom dropped out on that. And it wasn't unique to this area. It was kind of nationwide. And so where you see kind of that peak at the far left end, you would think that we would continue on a trajectory where that's going up. but instead it dropped off and we've never even caught pace to where we were before. We're not even at pretty much half of what we were at back in 2005. And even the last, 4 or 5 years, we really have not been building a lot of houses in southeastern Wisconsin. Walworth County, they're doing a lot. I would say Whitewater is driving a lot of that with a lot of creativity there. But for the most part, there's just not a lot of houses that are being built here, but there's a lot of demand for housing. Next slide, please. So something that I wanted to show you here, so this slide and the next slide, I won't spend too much time on the details of it because you have the information here, but I did want to talk about the concept of it. So when we talk about home ownership, what you really want to assume is that people are not spending more than 30% of their income on housing. So whether that's a mortgage and your insurance, or that's, a rental and rent that you're paying every month, you should not be paying more than 30% of your income on that. So what we did is we took a bunch of high demand job categories here in Kenosha County, and we looked at what their average wage was and then what they could afford when it comes to buying a home. And so you'll see that, a lot of these workers, maintenance and repair workers, electromechanical assemblers, so a lot of manufacturing type of jobs, and then a lot of jobs that help to support the economy. So childcare workers, people like that, teachers, they really don't have a lot of buying power when it comes to homes. And a good question that I think we always get when we look at this is, well, in a lot of cases, you've got a 2-income family, right? So I would say double those numbers and you're still looking at a number that's lower than the average house that's being built right now. The average house that's being built, you're looking at on the very low end, $400,000 to $500,000. That's about as cheap as you can build a house right now. And then the starter homes that have been in the community a much longer time, those homes are selling for $300,000 at this point. So it's not even that those are affordable for families like this. So I, again, won't spend too much time on the details of this. You have it, but again, it just kind of demonstrates what some of the challenges here. So you can skip the next slide and then go on to the one after that, please. Thank you. So this, I think, is just a good snapshot of all of these different variables that are driving some of this shortage. So one, home prices are going up. The reason for that is a number of things. One, you've got rising interest rates. So people are having a harder time with buying power because they're spending more on interest. We have a very low inventory right now, which obviously limited supply drives up the cost for anything. Financing markets are also really tight. So we're hearing from developers and home builders that it's really difficult to get financing to build single family housing. We're also seeing a very significant increase in the overall cost of development, and that is everything. It's the labor force that's actually building it. It's the cost of the HVAC systems. It's the cost of putting infrastructure in. Every single aspect that goes into building a house is getting more expensive, similar to anything right now. Zoning requirements can be challenging. There are large lot sizes required, so that ends up meaning that you have to put more infrastructure in. That costs more money. The house is bigger. There might be materials that are required that are more expensive. In a lot of cases, you have communities where residents don't want to see more housing, even if it's $750,000 homes. They just aren't interested in seeing more development. And then we just don't have a lot of housing developers in the market. So that's something we've been thinking about a lot too. From what I understand, prior to the recession in 2008 and 2009, there actually were a lot of home builders in the area. And similar to all across the country, a lot of them just kind of went away, right? They either went bankrupt or they got absorbed by bigger builders. And so a lot of those builders are not here or they're not operating here. And we always talk about the unique value proposition of being between Chicago and Milwaukee. This is maybe where one of those situations where that's maybe not as much of a benefit because we don't have as much of a defined market as a Chicago or Milwaukee does. And then just the last piece that I think is really interesting to talk about is the need for life cycle housing. So if you have a family, they live in a 2,500 square foot home, maybe they've got 2 kids, those kids grow up, they move away. The adults are still living in the house because maybe they have a 3.5% interest rate, or they've paid off their mortgage. And there's nowhere for them to go where they could actually afford a better opportunity, right? So number one, a big part of that is opportunities for senior housing, and not just assisted living, but cool senior communities that are dynamic, where people can age in place, maybe have different living opportunities. People want to live close to where their family and friends are. They don't want to be, moving away to a different community. So that's a piece of it. And then just kind of building different phases of housing. So it's not really just about affordable housing. It's about that $400,000 price point. It's about that $1 million price point. We hear from Aurora and Freighter that they have a hard time getting physicians to move here. We hear from our executives that they're not even living here because they can't find what they're looking for. So we just need more of everything. It doesn't mean that we need to get involved in that more of everything, but by injecting ourselves in different aspects of that, that can help free up the market a little. So with that, did want to talk about our initiative with Kenosha County government. So next slide, please. So I'm really excited for all the work that we've been doing in partnership with Kenosha County government. We launched in October of 2024, the Kenosha County Housing Task Force. And really what this is intended to do is to bring in people who are smart on this topic and have them help us develop tools and solutions and recommendations of how we can start influencing this housing shortage and what we can start doing to actually have a positive impact on that. I will tell you, I personally have no experience in housing whatsoever. Most of my peers across the country have not worked in housing, but all of a sudden you're starting to see economic development organizations getting involved in this space because they say, look, our employers are saying this is the biggest challenge. That's what we're hearing here. We need to start doing something about this. So again, that's why we're trying to bring smart people into the conversation. And really grateful to all the support from the county. This is truly a joint effort here. So Andy with Planning and Development, and then Savannah Meyer with UW Extension. It's really the three of us that are driving this and leading everything. And they've been great resources and great partners in all of this. Next slide, please. Then I'll share a little bit about the process and then dive into where we're at today. So again, in November, we had a kickoff meeting. We had about 50 people attend that. And the intent behind the overall process is to have about 18 months where we're really digging into these issues. And then at the end of that 18 months, we've got very strong recommendations coming out of that group in a couple of key areas of ways in which that we can start influencing this problem. So really where we're at in this is we're in the developing recommendation stage. Next slide, please. And really the people that we've engaged in this effort. So we started that engagement process last summer. We've got a lot of people in home building and development because obviously they're the ones that are the boots on the ground. They're seeing the different challenges. We have a lot of financial institutions involved as well, and that's on two sides. So one is institutions that fund development, so they're actually financing it, and then also banks that are doing mortgages because they're kind of seeing what the home buyers are looking for, seeing what the tools are out there. Our municipalities are also involved. Every single municipal partner across the county has been invited to participate, and pretty much every single one of them is, even if they're not that interested in advancing more housing. You know, some of our rural towns, which that's great. You know, they're trying to preserve what they're doing there. A lot of our major employers, Uline, Snap-on, they've really gotten involved in this effort as well, our educational and healthcare institutions, and then a number of nonprofits. Next slide, please. And really where the work is happening on these topics is across three different areas. So we broke it down across Andy, Savannah, and myself in three areas where we think we could affect some change. So one is financial tools. That's the one that I'm leading, and we're really hoping what will come out of that is recommendations to CABA and potentially some of our other partners. It could be municipalities, it could be employers, of different tools we can develop. We have a pretty significant revolving loan fund that does not have restrictions. So it's one that, you know, isn't necessarily funded by the county or a municipality or the federal government, where we could pivot and use some of that money to support a housing initiative. But we've already got some ideas around that. We've got some housing developers that are helping us think through that. And then there's a planning, zoning, and design standards committee that's really digging into exactly that, right? So if you start looking at some creative zoning ideas, you start looking at some different design type of activities that really could help move the needle a little bit as well. And Andy's leading that effort. And then Savannah is leading the public engagement, communications, and marketing group. And that's two sides of the same coin. So one is educating people in general about the need for more housing and that it's about housing for all and attainable housing. This is not talking about Section 8 housing. This is more of we need to start solving this problem and start advancing more housing here. And then the other side of that is developing some marketing strategies for home builders and developers, helping them understand the value proposition here. Andy does a great job maintaining a map that shows, just as an example, where areas maybe have been platted for a subdivision, but then the developer walked away for some reason, but they spent the time and money to do that. So if a developer came in, they're kind of 10 steps ahead if they were to capitalize on those properties. So that's just one example of something that we're looking at marketing to developers and home builders. So those work groups started in January. The groups have been great. They're dedicating a lot of time, and these are busy people, but they see the value in being part of this. We just wrapped up our second set of those meetings a couple of weeks back, and we'll have our third set of meetings in April. Those are already scheduled. And then we're going to reconvene the entire housing task force probably in June, July timeframe, where these groups will all report out on what they've been doing, because obviously they want to hear what each other's doing. This is not all in a vacuum. There's a lot of interplay across these topics. We'll probably bring in a couple of speakers to talk about, maybe initiatives in other parts of the state that are going on that have been successful. And then we'll start hopefully working on that recommendations document. All of that to say, progress is happening in the interim, right? So you're seeing a lot of development happening. We at COB are already working on a program that we could develop, or some pilot projects that we could be doing in partnership with developers or municipalities. So even though we're giving this an 18-month timeframe, it doesn't mean that work isn't happening in the interim. But we did want to have this comprehensive process so that we're trying, and again, a lot of expertise, because this is a new space for all of us. So again, just really grateful to the county executive for her leadership in partnering with us on this, and then to Andy and Savannah for being really key partners in actually driving that effort. So with that, I'm glad to answer any questions you have.
Well, thank you. That was a very concise report. I have no questions for once in my life. So
Great.
thank you very much for bringing that in. Does the committee have any questions? Supervisor Gerston?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Nicole, I've seen analysis like this, and sometimes what comes out of it is looking nationwide and looking at communities that are gold standard and that are doing really, really well. And then some that are doing good, average, and then ones that are struggling. Do you have any idea where we are? Where are we?
That's a great question. So from the standpoint of an initiative, we're in the early days of that. And I think there are communities that have been thinking about this longer than we have, honestly. And that's okay, right? We're kind of trying to figure it out. I would say, Savannah did a really excellent job at the beginning of this process of doing some of that best practice research, where she looked all across the country. She tried to look at, I would say, peer communities, for lack of a better word. We're not going to look at Los Angeles. That doesn't really make sense, but kind of more like mid-range urban areas, and areas that are maybe close to a major metropolitan area. So she shared that, and that was part of the presentation at that first meeting that we had. So we can definitely share that with all of you. But yeah, I would say we're kind of in the middle. At least we're thinking about it. There are a lot of communities that are not, but also it doesn't hurt to not be the first, because then there's all these great ideas out there that we can replicate, duplicate, modify. And we have a lot of peers across the state even that are doing a lot of this space. So yeah, I would say kind of in the middle.
So just to follow up on it, one of the outcomes that I was hoping for was there are gold standard communities that are doing better than us and have found solutions that it'll always be a struggle, but they're doing better than other community. It was my hope that one of the outcomes would be, those 2 or 3 or 4 things they're doing that we're not, that we could implement, that would move the needle on this issue for Kenosha. That was, and I yield.
It's a great point, though, and definitely something we're thinking about. One of the speakers we'll bring in this summer is Kelly Westland. She works for UW Extension, kind of big extension, and she's done a lot around community land trusts. So she's an expert on that topic. It's something that we don't really understand because we haven't dealt with it. I've experienced it more on the natural resource side of things earlier in my career, but not with housing. So she's going to come in and talk about good examples of that. Similarly, Brian Doudna, who's my counterpart in Sheboygan, their EDC, they're actually building houses, which is fascinating. I'm not trying to get into that space, but hearing from him what they're doing, the grassroots effort there. So Washington County, I know, right?
Settle down.
Need more coffee for that one, but. Yeah, Washington County, they're doing a lot of cool stuff too. So I think we'll bring some of those people in to talk about their experiences and lessons learned and see what we can duplicate.
Mr. Chairman, sorry that Nicole triggered I have gone to a presentation where a community, and I think it was Washington County, did engage in home building and development. And I remember the county administrator talked about that being a really good tax base and a lot of other things. So I remember this was a few years back, and maybe you might have been at that moment. So, yeah, but I just remember counties doing that. And I remember hearing a presentation from the county administrator, I think from Washington, it might have been Sheboygan. So, and sorry, now I finally do yield.
Yeah, the other one was a fake.
Yeah, that was
Okay. Supervisor Kirby?
So, I know like the city of Kenosha has put forth a pretty big initiative towards housing. Are we working with them to make sure we're not duplicating their efforts?
That's a great question. So yes, working very closely with the city. Tim Casey is involved in this effort. He's the community development director there. The mayor's fully briefed on what we're doing. I would say, everyone's working on this in tandem together and separately, but we all know what each other's doing. So they're just kind of one piece of the puzzle. And then there will be some overarching other recommendations that probably are relevant to the city. But yeah, he's very involved. Great question.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other comments, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
To hear
Great
from you
night.
again.
Appreciate your time.
Number 7, finance. Official resolution authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $2,500,000 general obligation bonds and or notes for waterway projects. Patty?
You have before you the initial resolution that was discussed in relation to the purchase of the property for the South Pike project. As Supervisor Geertsen had mentioned in his recollection of the project, we have initial resolution authority for 2.6 million that came in a couple different pieces, the majority of which was 2.2. That came forward in 2021 for the 2022 budget. That has not been exercised at this point. This 2.5 rounds out the entire cost of the project, keeps us in compliance with our new capital improvement policy, which states that we'll have an initial resolution approved by 3/4 of the board before a project is undertaken. So this would be that last piece in the puzzle. So we would look for your approval on this.
Thank you. Supervisor Gearston.
Chairman, I would move the resolution.
Moved by Supervisor Gearston, second by Supervisor Brookhausen. Any questions? Supervisor Gearston.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to emphasize the point that Patty made, that in the last term, when we saw this challenge with this project, the board did adopt policy, and Patty mentioned that to address this. So we did our job. We adopted policy so that we make sure a project's fully funded before it can proceed. So that was the thing I wanted to emphasize, and I yield.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
I heard you too, so I don't have to ask you. Any nays? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Number 8, the sheriff resolution to accept the justice assistance grant license plate reader cameras.
Good evening, Captain Eric Cameron here to present the resolution to accept the JAG grant for license plate readers. We applied for and were accepted and approved for this grant, which allows us to purchase 3 license plate readers, which can be moved around the county at various locations and used in trouble spots. Areas where we have rashes of crimes, including burglaries or thefts or that sort of thing. These license plate readers do not live feed to like a flock camera. So it records the data, and then we would review that data and hopefully develop suspects, as has been done successfully with the cameras at pets for car entries, etc. So this would be just a system that we could move around and would be portable. The state presented this grant, and we did the application. We're accepted for $18,757. And we would like to purchase those license plate readers with this grant. The only long-term cost would be a license for the camera.
Yeah, so there's 3 licenses that we would incur costs for. It's more like an ongoing type expense. It's about $31.75 per month for the 3 cameras, which is about $382 per year. And I believe that the grant will pay for like the first 6 months, and then we're responsible after that. So it's something we would have to put into our budget, like in our subscription budget in the future.
Moved by Supervisor Nudo, second by Supervisor Geertsen. Any questions or comments? Supervisor Gama.
Thank you. So would Sheriff's Department keep this data for a definite amount of time?
No, we have policies on getting rid of that data. I'm not exactly sure what they are, but there are policies, and I believe the data is, I'm not sure exactly where the data is recorded, but it doesn't go into the cloud. It's recorded on the device.
Right.
And we would likely clear that device on each deployment once we look at the data.
Okay.
There's all. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 9, Public Works. It's a governmental responsibility resolution for urban non-point source and stormwater grants.
Good evening, Shelley Billingsley, Public Works, sorry. This is a grant application that we're looking to have support planning efforts for anticipated regulatory changes for our agricultural and stormwater runoff pollution. These are new regulations that are being passed highly on the upper Illinois Fox River Basin watershed, but they may require us to implement measures and for those new regulations to be able to be met. The grant would enable the county to proactively identify areas of concern and develop strategies before the regulations are enforced. That would help us ensure a smooth transition. So this is required as a grant submittal as a resolution for the funding. This would be awarded in 2026. So if the grant is awarded, it would be placed into the 2026 budget. It is a 50-50 cost share grant.
That we accept this grant.
Moved by Vice Chair Gashby, seconded by Supervisor Nato. Questions from the committee? So it's 50-50 and it would take effect in 2026, you're saying?
Correct. It would be a planning grant. So we would get, what we're anticipating right now is about a $60,000 budget item, which would be 50% paid for by the grant applicant if we are awarded the grant.
And that's a planning, it's just for planning.
Correct. This is for planning we're gonna have to submit a plan to meet the total maximum daily loading pollution limits if they come on us. This would be the plan to outline how we would go about doing that. We are aware of what the requirements are being discussed to be, so we do have a point that we would be able to plan towards.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. I just grabbed it. Audit of bills. Did everybody sign the bills? That a yes?
Yes.
Okay. 11, administration.
Do a general fund update on our forecast for year-end 2024. We have another month of analysis and activity added. As you can see from the bottom line, our projections from last month were pretty close to where we thought we'd end up. Probably 75% of these are final numbers. We still have some things that are outstanding, but I'll go through in detail which ones changed from last month and which ones there are still some work to be done to finalize those numbers for next month. So on the plus side, on the top part of the page, human services operating surplus, done much better. Expecting that. This is locking for the most part, that and that large surplus in that $4.6 million surplus is mainly comprised in our Children and Family Services division. Higher CCS revenues were received. Placements came in much lower than budgeted. That's the majority of that. In Dad's division, 600,000 surplus is being projected. That's in Medicaid savings. And in the health division, projection of $450,000 surplus having to do with vacancy in positions and increased revenues. Public Works improved from last month. Projection for their year end looking like closer to 450, 500,000 is surplus for that department. The general fund investment interest revenue. So what I'll do here is, if you look at that one and the one in the lower section called treasurer revenue deficit, that revenue deficit. So in last month's report, I was combining the net unrealized gain on investments with their treasurer revenue. It's more appropriate to be netted with the general fund interest revenue because that is the component in which that net unrealized gain is from. So that's combining. So long story short, I'm adding that to a different number, but in total, it was basically the same as 100,000 less altogether. I'll talk a little bit more about all I can say now. The treasurer's revenue deficit had to do with the delinquency tax interest received on that and the penalty. That's where that deficit is in. For 2025 budget, we took that down some to help with that. Workers' compensation insurance came in right where we thought it was, about $400,000 surplus net to the general fund. Liability insurance came in at a surplus of $200,000. Our final number for tax delinquencies came in at a reduction of $186,000. On the negative side, we have basically final numbers for Sheriff's Department. So between the operating expenditures deficit and the revenues deficit, it was a little more than $4 million. All based on the same things that I've been talking about, having to do with overtime, exceeding vacancy, the on-site medical, off-site medical expenses, prescription drugs, and other variable costs. And on the revenue side, the U.S. Marshals revenue and the extended supervision revenues coming in less than budget. On the sales tax side, last month I had reported that we had a record November. December came in at 1.8 million. Probably right in the ballpark of where we thought. We were hoping for a little more, but between November and December, when you compare 24s to 23, we were up 10%. So that was a good boost to the final numbers for 2024. And with that pushed us in the plus territory for 23 to 24. So we were actually 300,000 more than in 23, which is 1.3% more for 2025. We budgeted the same revenue line item or revenue amount for 2025. So any improvement in sales tax this year will eat into that deficit for 2025. Register of Deeds revenue, final number improved a little bit. The miscellaneous, we got a lot more final numbers on that. There's still some things that are still shaken out with carryovers, determining what will be carried over and what will lapse back, but that's a deficit of 300,000 net between expenditures and revenues. The treasurer's revenue, I already spoke to that regarding that. And then the vacancy deficit, which I had 110,000 as our best vacancy number that we've had in a number of years. So where that number looks like to be a good in the sweet spot. So bottom line, this is the ballpark we knew we'd be in. And it's proving to be that. There are some things that finance is looking with administration strategies that we can use to potentially reduce this number, but we'll go into more detail and present those for next month's committee. With that, I'll yield for any questions.
Matty? Supervisor Gears.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At our Brookside Board of Trustees meeting, and Gabe's on that Board of Trustees with me, we got a report, and going by memory, I think we had a surplus of 3.1 million. That you've seen that report. Have you seen that report?
Yes.
In Barnett?
Yes.
So, if I add that to this, we have $1 million surplus. What about Brookside, or not Brookside, what about the golf course? How did they do?
Golf, I think, Chris reported, he's thinking 1.2 million.
So that's 2.2 million if I add those all together. So if I'm looking at an entity-wide income statement, we have a 2.2 million roughly surplus. I know how the accounting doesn't always work out that way, but using this kind of a benchmark, we have a surplus of about 2.2 million. So that's, I'm in the ballpark there.
Yes.
Thank you, I yield.
Any other?
I just noticed I missed one of the lines that I wanted to talk about. So health insurance deficit, that increased. That's gonna be in the ballpark closer to where we're gonna be. So with the final analysis, a great majority of that is a large miss when it came to prescription drugs. We worked with our consultant to delve into what was the cause of that, and it kind of breaks down into 3 different categories. Each one probably about a third of the deficit. So the first third had to do with specialty drugs. We had a huge increase in use of specialty drugs. These are the ones that you see the commercials on: Humira, Stelara, high dollar cost, anti-inflammatory type drugs. The second one is anti-obesity, the Wegovy, Wegovy and
Ozempic.
Yes.
Zepbound, that's what I said. Wegovy. I think they removed.
Zepbound is the Eli Lilly.
Those are the 2 main drugs there. There was a large increase in that, and as the consultant noted, that we are not alone. Other counties, both public and private, saw large increases as a result of that. And the last piece had to do with just an increase in the number of prescriptions that were filled overall, so volume wise. Of these 3, the first 2 we did address because we saw this during leading up to budget time last year. So we did address those as part of the 2025 budget. So the specialty drugs, we instituted a biosimilar program, and what that means is there are similar drugs that are similar to these high dollar cost ones that are basically the same drug, but made by a different manufacturer. Now that these drugs are off their patent and their preventions from others making it. So with no disruption to the patient, those individuals can use these lower cost drugs. So we did that. And the other one is the anti-obesity. We changed it so that employees continue on that if they have conditions that are combined with that. So diabetes would be something that would still qualify, but if it's strictly for weight loss, that wouldn't be included as part of the plan. I can say that in the first 2.5 months, we've already seen those 2 strategies working, and we're seeing the numbers in the first 2 months come down on that. So hopefully that continue for 2025 and that'll help that number down. So I didn't want to skip over that. A lot of work went into that. Where we are, so that's it.
Okay, Barnett, can we use any of the money that Supervisor Gearston is telling us that, has made us look good here? The 3.1 and the 1.2, do our rules allow us to take any portion of that and give it to the general fund?
Well, that is one of the strategies that we're considering. Obviously, we have to be careful to make sure that we're not tapping into those funds, because overall, we know that Brookside is on good footing right now, but it wasn't that long ago they weren't on good footing. So we want to make sure that we're
Well, I'm not advocating for or against that, but I mean, just to use that to say that everything is all well and good when the sheriff's department is minus, geez, 4 million? I mean, that's just, I'm really looking forward to seeing how we're gonna budget that. And I circled the vacancy deficit, the vacancies. We're not having all those vacancies anymore like we used to. You know, that was part of the way we went to budgeting, to budget more of a real live, how many people we're gonna have, not have a big pool of vacancy money.
Yeah, so what I want to point out on that vacancy, that number represents the vacancy for the non-three big departments in the county. So the number that you see here for public works surplus, that's including their vacancy. The number for sheriff's department here, that's including the vacancy that they had, and also for human services. So that 650,000 that we budgeted for 2025, that's for the rest of the county, not including those. So that's why that's a good number where we need to be.
For the last 5 years, Human Services has dumped a big chunk in to help us out at the end. So I'm not gonna look forward to cutting them this year. So if we think we're gonna go and start cutting programs and stuff, I'm gonna have a problem with that. So they've done it for 5 years. Now we gotta budget correctly for the other departments. So just so you know, just throwing that out there. And we could sit here and say that we have excess in certain areas and the county's in great, and we are. We've had very good, financial practices to this point. It's just to get to the point where there's a lot of big things coming up and different budgeting strategies need to be looked at. So I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yeah, and to complement what you just said too, we're still in great fiscal condition. We're still a AAA rated. I mean, we're still.
I agree.
Overall, we're in great shape, which is we did have a down year.
And I'll remind everyone that our reserve policy says we'll have a minimum of 17%. Our target is 30%, and we're pretty close to that. And we just raised that target a few years ago. It used to be a target of 25%, so we would be well above that.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else with the administration report?
No, the only thing I would remind the committee that we will be doing the carryover closeout resolution next month. So that will be at the meeting on April 10th, going to the board on the 15th.
All right. Seeing nothing else from administration. A move to adjourn by Supervisor Nudo, second by Supervisor Gama. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody wishing to stay? I don't hear anybody, so we are adjourned.